Football is back, Broncos country. Well, at least preseason football is. Tomorrow, the Denver Broncos travel down to Arizona to face the Cardinals at State Farm Stadium. It's going to be the Broncos' preseason opener and the very first game for the Denver Broncos in the Sean Payton era. It's going to be the first time that players and coaches are really going to see how Sean Payton operates in a game situation. This is going to be Sean Payton's show through and through. It's going to be really cool to see just his overall leadership dynamic on the sideline. Obviously, he's the main offensive play caller, but just how engaged he is with his players on the sideline, how active he is when coaching them up, overall that kind of stuff, and just how he coaches his coaches as well, how he tells his coaches to delegate things and how he goes about his business in that regard. So that's going to be a really exciting thing to watch. But here, I wanted to go over some other things that I want us to monitor in this opening preseason game. And overall, what I think the Denver Broncos need to do to come away with a win in Arizona. Because although this game is not going to count against our win-loss record in the regular season, it still is a meaningful game in terms of what we can take away from it. Obviously, this is an opportunity for some of the younger players to showcase what they can do in game situations, and we've had some of the younger guys really step up in training camp, so it's going to be really fun to see if that production in camp can translate onto the field in a real game situation, or at least as close to what we can get to a simulated real game situation. However, this is also a good opportunity for the Denver Broncos starters, who obviously did not play at all in last year's preseason game. This is going to be the first preseason game for Russell Wilson in a Denver Broncos uniform, and Sean Payton says that the starters are going to play about 15 to 18 snaps in this game. Now, right away, regarding that plan, there's sort of an elephant in the room that we really need to address, and that's sort of my first big talking point here, is should the Denver Broncos reconsider their plan to play their starters for 15 to 18 snaps when reports are coming out that the Arizona Cardinals field is in really rough shape? So the Arizona Cardinals, obviously being in Arizona, you can't practice outside in 120-degree weather. So they have to go inside at State Farm Stadium for their training camp practices. Reports coming out of Cardinals training camp are indicating that the grass field at State Farm Stadium is in really rough shape and that several players have gotten injured, non-contact injuries, because of the poor field conditions. One of them was former Broncos running back Marlon Mack, who had just signed with the Cardinals a few days ago. One of his first practices with the team, he suffered a non-contact torn Achilles and is now out for the season. And reporters say that that injury could be directly attributed to the crappy turf. But this has actually been a similar concern with the Denver Broncos with their grass field over at Centura Health Training Center. We've seen several players slip on the turf over there at Centura Health Training Center, and Tim Patrick, I feel like his injury could almost be directly attributed to his slip and his footing not being there on that questionable field. Sean Payton recently hired new guys to manage the field over at Centura Health Training Center, and we've seen already some concerning injuries regarding the turf over there. So should the Denver Broncos consider not adding on to that problem and consider maybe not playing their starters or their key players as much on this questionable field in Arizona? Well, Sean Payton was asked about that in a recent press conference, and he said that the field conditions in Arizona are going to have no impact on the Denver Broncos' plan to play their starters or any of their key backups in this game. That's a little concerning to me. I'm wondering if Sean's going to get out there and see the field for himself and maybe realize, okay, this is in really bad shape. Maybe we should reconsider this and maybe only let our starters go out there for a drive or two. So let's say that the Denver Broncos starting offense goes out there and they look good and they go out and they score a touchdown on their opening drive, and then the defense comes out and they get a stop on their opening drive. If I'm Sean Payton, I'm considering pulling the starters out at that point, even if it's shy of 15 to 18 snaps on both sides of the ball, because I would consider that if both of the opening drives were successful, I'd consider that a win for the starters and just get them out, man. We can give them more snaps next week in San Francisco and even more snaps after that when we're back home in Denver for our preseason finale against the Rams. So this may not be the best opportunity for the starters here to play 15 to 18 snaps. But let's say that Sean Payton does indeed stick to his guns here. So the first thing that we're going to be watching, obviously, is Javonte Williams. He is going to be returning from his torn ACL, seeing his first in-game action. And I've been out at Denver Broncos training camp every single day, and this cat, you can't even tell that he was injured. He looks incredible out there. He is cutting incredibly well. He is still running with that same angriness and physicality. Obviously, he has to dial it back a little bit in a practice environment because they're not going at full speed. So I'm excited to see Javonte Williams maybe rip off a big, angry run against the Cardinals now that he's going against somebody who's not on his own team and he can actually lay into people a little bit. So I'm really excited to watch Javonte Williams. The main thing that we're going to have to monitor is how is his snaps going to be managed between him and Samaje Perine. I feel like if we do indeed stick to the 15 to 18 snaps plan, Javonte should get about maybe 7 to 8 snaps, maybe 3 or 4 carries, a pass protection rep, and maybe a pass out of the backfield. And then after that, it should be Samaje Perine for the rest of the way for the starters. And then we can turn things over, obviously, to Tyler Beatty, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Tony Jones. But Javonte Williams is going to get his first game action tomorrow night in Arizona, so a lot of Broncos fans, myself included, are so excited to finally see Pookie back out there. And again, just the fact that he is where he is right now in his recovery from his injury, that is just absolutely incredible, guys. So I'm really, really excited for Javonte in this game. The next biggest thing we're obviously going to be paying attention to when the starting offense is in there is Russell Wilson. How does he look in his first chance to see live action this season? He's started to stack some really positive days out at training camp, so we'll see if that translates into this game action against the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are an opponent that Russell Wilson is obviously quite familiar with. He faced them 2 times a year, every single year when he was with the Seattle Seahawks, so he's very familiar with that stadium, very familiar with everything about this Cardinals team pretty much. So it's going to be really exciting to see if Russell Wilson can showcase some of that familiarity against that squad. The other things I'm going to be watching for are his decision making. Is he timely and decisive when making his throws? Is he getting the ball out quick? That's something that's been heavily predicated in training camp practice. Also, how's the chemistry looking between him and Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, as well as guys like Marquez Callaway and Little Jordan Humphrey, who figure to have an extended role in this offense. Unfortunately, Brandon Johnson doesn't look to play in this game. He's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. So it sucks that Russ isn't going to be able to develop more chemistry with him, but the chemistry between those two has definitely been there in training camp. So that's something I'm going to be watching with Russ. And also just, is there any rust there at all? Does he look uncomfortable at all out there? Is there any indecisiveness? Just stuff like that, you know? That's the kind of thing I'm going to be watching for Russell Wilson in this game. I figure that he'll be out there, probably he'll get, I don't know, 10 chances to throw the ball. So it's going to be really exciting to watch Russell Wilson to see if he can lead this offense downfield for maybe an opening drive touchdown or 2. That would be awesome to see, and that would give Denver Broncos fans a lot of confidence, I feel like. I know it would give me a lot of confidence going into next week and then going into the rest of camp in the preseason as well. I'm also heavily going to be watching this Denver Broncos offensive line because that's been a top concerning storyline in training camp as well. Obviously, Mike McGlinchey is not going to play in this game as he got a knee sprain a couple of days ago in practice and figures to miss probably the rest of training camp, which really, really stinks because he needs some live reps. But I'm going to be monitoring if Garrett Bowles plays in this game. And if he does play, is he going to see the same amount of starting reps as the rest of the starters do? Or are they maybe going to pull him out after maybe just like 7 or 8 plays or 1 drive? Maybe if they throw the rest of the starters out there for a second drive, Bowles doesn't go out there, because I'm concerned about Garrett Bowles. I've expressed that plenty on this channel. He doesn't look like he's moving very well out there coming off of his broken leg. So I'm going to be very curious to watch Garrett Bowles out there and see if the Cardinals defensive line manhandles. They've got a couple of really nice pieces on that D-line, Myjai Sanders, Cam Thomas. So I'm going to be watching Garrett Bowles pretty carefully if he does even play. I think there's a chance that the Broncos could just hold him out and we could see Cam Fleming at left tackle and Isaiah Prince at right tackle. So I don't know, man. Keep an eye on Bowles if he does even play in this game. game tomorrow night. Regardless if Bowles does play or not, I'm going to be keeping a heavy eye on Isaiah Prince because I got to be honest, there's a pretty strong chance that we could have both Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey out for at least one game in the regular season. That would mean Cam Fleming would lock down the left tackle position. I'm not really concerned about Cam Fleming. He's been our most consistent swing offensive lineman and just one of our more consistent offensive linemen, period. But Isaiah Prince has looked really rough in training camp. We signed him. He spent some time with the Bengals previously. We signed him this offseason, and overall, things just look like they haven't really been clicking with him, even though he's actually been seeing some starting reps at right tackle with Garrett Bowles being held out of some of the practice drills, and then obviously in wake of the Mike McGlinchey injury. So I'm going to be watching number 70 Isaiah Prince at right tackle quite a bit because he figures to see quite a bit of action. So will he be able to hold up with his base and with his anchor? Will he get beat? Will he get any holding calls? Stuff like that. We need to keep a heavy eye on Isaiah Prince tomorrow night, Broncos country. The final thing I want to watch with the offensive line is which one of the reserve guys is going to be able to step up. Will someone like Alex Palczewski or maybe Henry Bird or DeMontre Jacobs or someone like Kyle Fuller, which reserve offensive lineman really will finally step up and make an impact? Because there's been some struggles with the reserve offensive line as well. I'm also going to be watching 7th round rookie Alex Forsyth, the center, because thus far he's still stuck at 3rd on the depth chart at center. He hasn't been able to beat out Luke Wattenberg yet. So I'm going to be watching that little competition there for the backup center job between Luke Wattenberg and Alex Forsyth. Sorry, lost his name for a second there. But that's the last thing that I wanted to bring up with the offensive line. Moving into the receivers and the tight ends now. Marvin Mims will be making his NFL debut, or at least his preseason debut. And he's somebody who figures to see quite a bit of snaps on offense. He'll see some significant action both out wide and in the slot. And he's also listed as the Broncos' primary starting return man, both at kick returner and at punt returner. So we'll see if he's able to hold on to that job or if Montrell Washington will push him, because right now it seems to be between those two, but Marvin definitely has the leg up for that return man job. Let's see if he can retain it throughout the preseason. Speaking of Montrell Washington, I'm going to be keeping an eye on him, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on Kendall Hinton. They both had pretty rough starts to camp, but over the last couple of days, they've also started to stack some positive days. So I want to see if those two wide receivers can stack that momentum into this preseason game, because they're both kind of teetering on the roster bubble right now, and I want to see if one of them separates from the other, quite frankly, and I want to see which one is able to maybe push for a spot on the active roster between Montrell Washington and Kendall Hinton. Then with the tight ends, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about Greg Dulcich here in Broncos country. The depth chart was recently released, the unofficial depth chart yesterday, and Greg Dulcich was listed as the tight end 2 behind Adam Troutman. I talked about in that video how I don't think that's very much of a concern, because Greg Dulcich is more going to fill like the receiving tight end role, whereas the Broncos are going to run the football quite a bit, and we need somebody who's better at run blocking at tight end in those situations. That's why somebody like Adam Troutman and Chris Manhertz, those guys are going to see a lot more snaps, but that doesn't mean that Greg Dulcich isn't going to make a big impact. He's going to be a big weapon for us, especially on 3rd down, obvious passing situations, as well as in the red zone. This cat is going to probably accumulate a lot of touchdowns this year, although the yardage between the 20s may not be there. Again, 3rd down, red zone, this cat is going to be a big weapon for us. Greg Dulcich still has elite vertical speed. He reminds me a lot, and I mean a lot, of Noah Fant, because Noah just was not a blocker at all. He put forth the effort, he just wasn't, the skill set just wasn't there as a blocker for Noah Fant. And I see a very similar story with Greg Dulcich. The Broncos, under their previous coaching regime, had no idea how to truly use Noah Fant, and that's why they ultimately shipped him off to Seattle, who's kind of having a similar problem with him. But Sean Payton is one of the best play designers and one of the best mismatch schemers in the NFL. So I'm very confident, and this is based on what I've seen out at training camp, that Greg Dulcich will be a big impact player for us, even though he may not be the quote-unquote tight end 1. Now, another tight end that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is definitely Albert Okwuegbunam. I've been saying that Albert Okwuegbunam is not likely to make the roster for some time now. His best chance to make the Broncos is probably practice squad. He was listed as the Denver Broncos' fifth string tight end when the depth chart came out. So you can see that Albert Okwuegbunam is not in very high favor with this team right now. He's basically being used as like a big slot receiver. He isn't really even being used as a tight end. I don't know. I'm curious to see when Albert Okwuegbunam enters the game. It may be not until like the fourth quarter. That's just a testament to the lack of confidence that the Denver Broncos have in Albert O right now. And I'm definitely thinking that Alberto's best chance to make the team is practice squad. And right now, there may be guys that take priority over him. Tommy Hudson had a really nice play, a really nice catch from Russell Wilson in the first team offense in yesterday's training camp practice. So that pretty much goes to show where the team stands on Alberto right now. And he may just, I don't know, man. I don't know where things are with Alberto. I'm going to be watching that pretty heavily. So moving on to the defensive side of the ball, Broncos country, obviously we've got a couple of homecomings here as defensive coordinator Vance Joseph, who served for the past 4 seasons as the Cardinals defensive coordinator after he got fired as the head coach of Denver. He's going to be going back to Arizona, as well as Zach Allen, who obviously worked with VJ down there. He's going to be going back to Arizona as well. And we've talked about Zach Allen quite a bit. He has been one of the biggest storylines in training camp. This cat is all over the place in the backfield. Vance Joseph talked about him in his recent press conference and said that you can really see that he was a sponge during his couple of years around J.J. Watt and that he's really come into his own as a player. And as many times as number 99 has come up in my notes out at training camp, you would think that I'm watching J.J. Watt out there. Number 99 is in the backfield, consistently making plays both in the run game and the pass game. So although he may not see too many snaps, I'm going to be curious to see if Zach Allen could get a sack potentially against his former team. Although it is in the preseason, it would be kind of cool for him probably to stick it to his old team. The other thing I'm going to be watching, obviously, is the edge rushers. Frank Clark and Randy Gregory are our 2 starting edge rushers, but they're going to be heavily rotating in Nick Benito and Jonathan Cooper. Those 2 have taken the next step in their development as young edge rushers. I'm so excited to see Nick Benito and Jonathan Cooper in this game, and I'm curious to see if Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, how many snaps they get, first of all, and second of all, if one of them can maybe get a sack in this game. But I'm truly excited for Nick Benito and Jonathan Cooper because those 2 have been feasting against the Denver Broncos starting tackles. Arizona's offensive line situation is not ideal, to say the least. So it's going to be fun watching those 2 young edge rushers for sure. I'm also going to be watching a couple of other young edge rushers in Thomas Incoom and Christopher Allen, a couple of undrafted free agents, because Christopher Allen and Thomas Incoom, they kind of had a couple of good plays in training camp, but overall they've been pretty quiet. And I know that fans have really expected one of those 2 to break out as a reserve edge rusher. So we'll see if maybe they stand out a little bit more in game situation as opposed to practice situation. Because sometimes there are players out there who just practice worse than they play. I mean, they're better players on game day than they are on the practice field. That happens sometimes. So I'm going to be watching those 2 young edge rushers in particular. And then Drew Sanders, man, he'll be making his NFL debut. I'm just so excited to watch Drew Sanders. He flies all over the field. I mean, this cat is a playmaker at linebacker. I'm so excited to see him get his first game action. Moving on to the secondary, we probably aren't going to see Justin Simmons in this game. He did not participate in walkthroughs yesterday, and based on the way that Sean Payton has handled things before, if you don't participate in Friday walkthroughs, then, or this would technically be a Friday walkthrough because of the timing, but if you don't participate in those walkthroughs, then you probably aren't going to play in the game. And Justin Simmons is like one of the few guys that I don't think needs that many reps in the preseason. I'm not really worried about him, but I'm going to be curious to see how guys like Caden Stearns and PJ Locke step up. Caden Stearns figures to be our starting safety alongside Justin Simmons. PJ Locke's gotten a pretty extended look there as well. Kareem Jackson has kind of more been used as like a dime linebacker, like a thumper down near the line of scrimmage, because I think the coaching staff is starting to realize that K-Jack's a pretty big liability in coverage now, but he's still a really amazing impact player as a blitzer, as a thumper, someone who can play in the run game, stuff like that. So K-Jack is almost like an extra linebacker out there in a sense. That's kind of the role that the Broncos are envisioning for him. So I'll be curious to see if K-Jack gets any snaps in the preseason or in this preseason game. I mean, he probably will get a few, but he's another one of those veterans not really worried about needing any preseason snaps. Jaquan McMillan, the Broncos' young corner, he's been a training camp darling. He's emerged as the primary backup boundary corner behind Pat Surtain and Damari Mathis, especially in wake of the Riley Moss injury. So I'm going to be watching him quite a bit. Art Green as well, the Broncos' undrafted free agent corner out of Houston. I'll be monitoring him. He's kind of had a quiet training camp after somewhat being one of the top touted undrafted free agents for the Broncos this year, so I'll be watching him quite a bit. Finally, guys, the Broncos kicking competition between Elliott Fry and Brett Maher. It seems that, no pun intended, Brett Maher has the leg up right now. Finally, guys, I just kind of wanted to go over the injury report real quick, who's in and who's out in this game. Again, we're probably not going to see Justin Simmons in this game, and we know for sure we're not going to see Mike McGlinchey, Brandon Johnson, or Riley Moss in this game. So we'll have to see if there's any other players that the Denver Broncos are going to hold out here. As far as the Cardinals are concerned, there hasn't been any plans released from their head coach, Jonathan Gannon, as far as if they're going to play very many of their starters, but reports are coming out that Colt McCoy, who is expected to be their week 1 starting quarterback without Kyler Murray, obviously, he's expected to play at least some snaps in this game. So that probably at least indicates to me that the starters will play at least one drive for Arizona. Otherwise, it's probably going to be a lot of their rotational players. And Arizona, they do have a very young team, so this could be a good opportunity for some of the Denver Broncos younger guys as well. So that's something that we'll be watching there for Arizona. All right, guys, how do you guys feel about going into this preseason game, and what big storylines are you going to monitor, and what big storylines are you going to watch in this game? Obviously, this game is not going to mean much in our final win-loss record when we go back in the regular season, but this definitely does mean a lot, obviously, to younger players, as it's some of their first NFL action and some of the lower-end roster guys fighting for a spot on the team. So this is a very meaningful game for the Denver Broncos, even though the final score may not be truly what we're taking away from this game. But I'm curious what you guys are going to be watching for in this game. Drop those comments down below, guys. I would love to hear your thoughts, as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are 2 free and easy ways to show your support. It helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out and helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, this has been another episode of Denver Broncos Syndicate. I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.